One of the funniest things about Vin Diesel, and nobody seems to talk about it anymore today, is the fact that the guy has a name of a film and his most famous franchise is about cars. I mean, that is still funny, right? Hello, my name is Gus, and I love to talk about movies, and especially trash movies, more than anyone that I consider normal in this world. And I'm wearing the swimming goggles in a failed attempt to look like Vin Diesel in Riddick, that great franchise of science fiction, action, and a little bit of horror. A franchise that nobody seems to remember today anymore, but every time somebody remembers it, I bet this person always thinks, those movies are kind of awesome. And I remember these movies specifically because of the other Vin Diesel's franchise, The Fast and the Furious, with the release of the 10th movie in the series. My gosh, 10th movie. And watching his character in that franchise, Dominic Toretto, performing miracles that not even Jesus was able to perform when he was alive on this earth, that I thought with myself, what happened with that excellent Riddick movie franchise? A franchise that had very well written scripts, and very unique visuals and design of universe. Why these movies are not getting endless sequels with the adventures of our bald, strong fugitive from space? After all, this is a universe that has great potential for new stories to be told. Instead, we're still getting empty sequels from this Mexican soap opera of the family, with the mightiest superheroes in the world in their muscle cars. And, oh my god, I cannot even tell a joke about these movies. They're like that joke that isn't funny anymore, but our uncle still tells us every single time we have a barbecue with the family. And I only say this because once in a while I think with myself, man, Vin Diesel was once a very interesting actor. To start, his career got a boost in 1995 when he wrote, directed, and acted in a short movie of his own called Multifacial, a movie that got a great visibility in the Sundance Festival at the time. I like the story because I have done the same thing myself by writing, directing, and acting in a short movie of my own called Love Frames, having the same mentality that Vin Diesel had with his short film, trying to open the doors of the possibilities by himself, and showing his skills as an actor. I have a great deal of respect for this kind of attitude. And for him, it worked out very nicely, because none other than Steven Spielberg watched his movie and called him to be part of this next movie called Saving Private Ryan. That's right, for those who don't remember, Vin Diesel was one of the soldiers in that movie. From then on, his career only boosted even more, having a growly, somber, and powerful voice. His next job was to voice the main character in the excellent animation The Iron Giant. That was in 1999, and in the next year he also showed up in the film Boiler Room, a movie about finances that had a great cast including Ben Affleck. And in the same year, the year 2000, he got his first main role in a live-action movie called Pitch Black, as the character Riddick, 1 year before the first The Fast and the Furious movie that gave him his stardom. And what all these movies presented to the audience was an actor that had great charisma despite his rough look. That caught the eyes of the producers that gave him more and more roles in the future, with the promise of an actor that, somehow like Sylvester Stallone, would alternate between dramatic roles and action roles. An example of that is a movie that I think few people saw, released in 2006 called Find Me Guilty, a movie where he portrays a mobster gangster that defends himself on court on his own trial. And he is excellent in this role. Anyway, this versatility and charisma was very well used in the character Riddick, a guy that is not a noble hero full of poetic quotes like his character in The Fast and the Furious, but the perfect definition of the anti-hero. To start, his character and mythology was created by a writer-director called David Dewey, a very interesting director that besides directing the Riddick movies, he also directed a movie called The Arrival with Charlie Sheen from 1995 and a movie called Below from 2002, and I watched both of these movies. They are okay, but the interesting thing is that the writing of David Dewey can be seen in both movies with his own personal style. For example, his characters are a little more developed than your regular action movie. Besides that, he also wrote a script for the movie Alien 3 from 1992, a script that was refused by 20th Century Fox, the studio at the time, but some of his ideas were used in the final movie, like for example, the whole movie taking place in a prison planet filled with prisoners. And I remember reading this script and detecting his personal characteristics in the style of writing. Characters that had a singular personality, suspicious morals, ironic lines of dialogue, and dark humor. It wasn't a great script, but it was a more interesting reading than the others in the pile of scripts that were written for that movie. But we can talk about this in another video because the production of Alien 3 was epic in terms of problems. So the whole story deserves its own video. But we can see all these characteristics that I mentioned in the Riddick movies, especially in its main character. So now talking about the movies themselves, I won't talk about the stories of the movies with all its details because I think the movies have great plot twists in all of them that deserve to be watched and discovered by you. So I will talk about what they are and what I love about them. The first movie, Pitch Black, starts with a spaceship transporting some passengers and a prisoner called Richard B. Riddick. A guy that came from a planet called Furia, with a species of humans that are a little more strong than the normal ones, and he has some kind of special eyes that are able to see in the dark. That's why he wears these protective goggles with dark lenses that protects his eyes from the brightness of the daytime. But this ship suffers an accident and is forced to land on a desert planet. Now the passengers that survived the crash must find a way to leave this planet, but the problem is that Riddick, the prisoner, was able to escape during the crash and now is at loose at the planet with them. And then we are introduced to a very distinct and interesting group of characters. We have the captain of the ship called Fry, we have an officer of the law called Jones that was in charge of transporting Riddick. We have a boy that is kind of the mascot of the group called Jack, and a religious man called Iman with his 3 sons that are also trapped in the planet with him. And it seems that the creator David Twohy has a lot of fun introducing these characters with distinct characteristics, singular fears, and suspicious morals. So much so that it doesn't take long for intrigues to come up between the group, especially among Riddick, Fry, and Johns. But that is far from being the worst problem. What the characters don't know is that the planet will go through an eclipse that will cover everything in darkness. And that under the earth there are very dangerous and lethal creatures that will leave their hidings as soon as the darkness covers everything. That means these creatures only go out at night. So the characters are screwed, and their hope now is the only guy who is able to see in the dark to guide them, none other than Riddick. Like I said, this movie is very short, but has a very well developed script, given time for each one of its characters to shine in the screen, giving a specific arc for each one even though they are side characters. For example, the Captain Fry has a very interesting character arc. She starts the movie as a very selfish character that tried to detach the passenger section in the ship during the crash, probably killing everyone just to make a safer landing. But she isn't able to do it, and when they land, everybody thinks she is a hero for saving everyone, but only her knows the truth. But while the movie goes on, she becomes a more altruistic character, caring for everybody else, and at the end we have a very shocking plot twist about the character that I won't reveal, but is very daring and bold. And the little boy in the group, Jack, is very interesting because he becomes like a fanboy of Riddick during the whole situation they are trapped in the planet, to the point that he shaves his head and wears a dark lenses goggle just to look like him. But the boy himself keeps a secret that is very unexpected to the plot. The movie has the ability of keeping your attention in the journey of the characters, and this is the script's greatest triumph. Because unfortunately it is a movie with a very low budget for its genre, and that can be seen very clearly on the screen. Even though the director David Twohy has a very interesting eye for the composition of action and horror scenes, contrasting the light and the darkness of the planet in a very intelligent way, the CGI effects to create the creatures especially is very artificial, something that kinda ruins the sensation of tension and fear of them. And the design of the creatures themselves is not as interesting as it could be. They look like flying sharks with pointy bone structures coming out of them. But that doesn't ruin the fun of the movie because they can be very threatening even so. Well, this is the best movie of the franchise for me, but the next ones are very good as well. But before we get to the sequel, in 2004 an animation was released called Riddick, Dark Fury, that tells the story of what happened between the first and the second movie with an isolated adventure of the character. In the story, Riddick is captured by a space relic collector, and her greatest items of collection are convict fugitives that are frozen but still conscious besides not being able to move. It's a great animation, very fun, and very similar in tone with the movies, and its style of animation is very similar to an old animated show on MTV called Ian Flux, a show that I will probably talk about in the future because it was very bizarre and fun. But in 2004, this movie was released called The Chronicles of Riddick. Looks like the title of a book. And this one expands the universe of the mythology very much and tells the story of Riddick running away from some bounty hunters and a race of warriors called necromongers, beings that convert other beings to be exactly like them. I remember this was the first movie that I watched from the franchise, and at the time I didn't understand anything, and that kind of ruined the experience for me. But after discovering Pitch Black and watching it, I got a great appreciation for this one, especially for being so different from Pitch Black. If in the first one we had a sci-fi story with pinches of horror movie, in this one we have a sci-fi story with battles and action, especially because of the bigger budget and the much better CGI effects. Here we learn a little bit more about the origins of Riddick, and he re-encounters a friend from the past that I won't tell her name because she has some connections with a character of the first movie. And the movie has some great scenes, like for example when his character, his friend, and some other guys start to run over the planet to escape from the sunrise, because this planet is called Crematoria, a planet that when the sunlight touches its surface, it hits so much that causes eruptions of fire and pulverizes everything around. A kind of a reflection of the planet in the first movie that went through an eclipse, and here it goes through the sun. Another interesting thing is that this movie has a great cast. We have Tandy Newton, Carl Urban, and Judi Dench. Well, it's a worthwhile experience that has great visuals and expands this universe as a whole. And that takes us to the third movie in the franchise that was released in 2013 called simply Riddick. This movie starts exactly where the third movie left us, but without giving spoilers, in that movie Riddick received an inheritance that he didn't want. Then he was betrayed and left for die in once again a desert planet with deadly creatures. Here the scale of the universe goes back to be smaller, in a story that has many similarities with the first movie, but is very interesting on its own. The first section of the movie shows Riddick getting used to this new planet and discovering its new creatures. So much so that he befriends an alien wolf that is very cool and makes it his pet. He also faces some monsters called the Mud Demons, creatures that have tails of scorpions and are very poisonous. The cool thing is that during these combats with the creatures, Riddick lets himself be poisoned by them so he can create some kind of immunity with time and face them later without this problem. Obviously, this couldn't be the only problems you would have to face. Two groups of bounty hunters arrive in the planet in search for him to get a bounty on his head. And one of the groups has a leader that has a very personal vendetta against Riddick. I won't tell which is, but is a character that has a connection with a character in the first movie as well. This is a movie that I like more than the second movie because of its smaller scale, also because the creatures are very well created by CGI this time, which helps the creative compositions of David Twohy with the creatures in the darkness, in the rain, and we have great characters as well. But I still think this one is a little behind the first movie for me because of the novelty of that one. And I think the logic of the creatures in that movie was a little more interesting. Although we have a very great cast in this one as well, with Katie Sackhoff, an actress that is very famous for the TV show The Mandalorian, and Dave Bautista, our Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, which means before Guardians of the Galaxy arrived in theaters, we already had our Drax and Groot in one movie together. And I can't deny that this movie has probably one of the best kill scenes that I've ever seen in the story of cinema, with Riddick killing one of the bounty hunters in one of the best, gory, trash, quick, and without using his hands way of killing a person that I've ever seen. I won't tell exactly the scene, but you will have to watch it to know what I'm talking about. Even the characters watching around think, what the f***? Anyway, the movie ends with the door open for Riddick to return in future adventures. And this is the question that remains now. Will we have a fourth movie in the future? Apparently, Dave DeTuy has already written a story for a fourth movie with Riddick. A script that Vin Diesel has already read, has already approved, but unfortunately he won't be able to do it for now because he is still doing the Mexican soap opera of cars. Oh boy, that pisses me off. And there you go. I love these universes that has a peculiar and original story, logic, and design. And for sure, the Riddick franchise is one of the top ones in this regard. If you haven't watched those movies, please go watch it. And if you want me to talk more about this kind of movies, science fiction, horror, trash movies, please subscribe to the channel so I can continue this work of bringing the pure and beautiful trashiness to our lives. And check the short movie that I mentioned in this video, a short film that I wrote, directed, and acted in it called Love Frames. Hopefully Steven Spielberg can watch it someday in a festival, who knows. And don't forget to check the link of my ebook on Amazon now, The Angel of Fire and Steel. A big epic adventure, very dark, that takes place in a universe between angels and demons, which I must admit has some inspiration in the Riddick universe as well. And that's it for today. See you in the next Trashing with Gus, and bye bye.